And Dr. Moirao.
Yes, well, this is the presentation on not reopening, and our DTA president has been very wise in reminding us that schools have been open all along. We never really shut down teaching. What we did was we had to close the doors to our classrooms, and this is our opportunity to reopen those. Thank you, Kiyoki. And if you jump to the next slide, Kiyoki, I appreciate that. And the next slide, what it does talk about there is the path to getting to this point where we can start to open our doors and welcome our students and our staff in smaller groups, but welcoming them back onto our campus. It's been a goal that since I've arrived here, and many of you may remember the visual that we had, that our goal was to open schools fully with all our students present at one time, but we also knew there would probably be a hybrid model in the middle. And what's been interesting is on this path, how things have changed so rapidly. And one of the pieces that many people don't understand as well is that it changes, it's different in one county versus the next. So there's all these different rules we're hoping to. So we're now on the brink of inviting our students back onto our campus, and we've reached a goal of having a remote or a hybrid version to reopen. Kiyoki, next one, please. I should also point out I've got staff here who's going to be able to answer some of the detailed questions because so many different people have been involved, and I need to commend all of our staff for the many hours that have been put into bringing us to this point. So as we've already said, is there nothing more than what we'd like to do is get back to what we knew as pre-pandemic days of full-time instruction. I don't know if it'll ever look quite the same, but we do want to move into the hybrid model right now. Next slide, Kiyoki, please. So on February 19th, our site-specific plans have been posted, and these are intended to address the health and safety procedures. One of the changes that happened after the board approved the original plan or sent the resolution is we then had to develop the COVID Protection Plan, CPP, that's now was added, required by Cal OSHA. And so on the January 12th, the board did approve the plan that said targeted March 8th. And at that meeting, it was emphasized by board members and me that March 8th is a soft date in that there were still so many factors. And if you can harken back your memory to January 12th, you may remember that being in the purple meant something very different than what it does today to be in the purple range. And that's the sort of changes that have been going on and haunting us through this whole process. So it was approved, it was submitted to the Alameda County Office of Education. They sent it back with 3 things they wanted us to add. Phone numbers, making sure we identified Cottonwood Creek as to what levels are we opening at Cottonwood Creek, because it was a K-8. And then they wanted a little more elaboration on our testing program. Now we're getting ready to open in our hybrid in-person instruction, and we're in the process of finishing up some safety videos for all of our staff and our students. Next slide, Kiyoki, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to be sending out this Thursday declaration forms to all our families. And the choices that our families will have is, do they want to participate in the hybrid in-person instruction and sample agendas, which we'll see in just a few moments, sample schedules, excuse me, will be attached. Do you want to stay on remote instruction? Or, and this is at the elementary level, remain with your teacher regardless of what the teacher chooses to do. And we will work very hard to fulfill those requests. Now, what some people may wonder about is switching between these different models. The only way to stay within our safety zone is that if somebody chooses hybrid and decides to go back to distance learning, we can honor that. We can't honor the other way because we're starting to mix cohorts and all of that, and we still need to remain within the parameters of our county about those cohorts. Next slide, Kyoki. So we're going to send those out on Thursday of this week, and we're going to ask for a quick turnaround because we want to get things open. And so we're going to ask by Sunday if you could return those. The following Monday, from who we haven't heard, we'll start to reach out and get your responses. And then between the 1st of March and the 12th, we'll need to develop new schedules. We're now putting together a puzzle, and this also will be surveying our teaching staff at the same time, determining their preference. And as much as we can honor that, we're going to be doing that. But we also know that we may need more teachers in the classroom, or we may need more teachers to stay on distance learning. Both factors from the families and from the teachers are critical on this particular piece. So by the end of the day on March 12th, we'll notify folks in DK and preschool DK and K which schedule you're on, and by the 18th, we will open up with those particular grade levels. Secondary hybrid, trust me, number one, our secondary administration is real eager to reopen. The complexity of secondary will be explained again in just a few moments with the schedules, but it's really, we now run into credentialing issues and the fidelity of keeping courses together. I may have a credential that only allows me to teach a certain up to a certain level of math. Well, that means that if we've got more students coming back with a different math program, how do we match them all so that we can keep our students on task? Again, I want to assure you that our high school, all of our secondary administrators are eager to get students back. And so they're frantically working on all of that. But again, we need the surveys from families. Next slide, Kyoki, please. So here's a verbal or printed version of what the hybrid models might look like. And what I'm going to do is open up the door for Curtis Haar, and at some point, I think Sherry Sweeney's going to step in here and explain the different schedules that we have. Curtis, you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Moirao. So if you look at the left-hand column here regarding elementary school, our students will be returning in an AM/PM format to allow us to be able to keep our cohort sizes consistent and small enough to be able to allow us to keep our physical distancing that we are required to do upon reopening. For our elementary age students would be returning to school on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Wednesday, students would have an all remote day. We will do everything that we can to place our elementary aged siblings in the same AM/PM assignment. However, due to some staggering of drop off and pickup times, there may be some variance in regards to picking up both of your children. If you have students that are in, say, kindergarten and 5th grade, there will be some differences in those drop off and pickup times that we will have to help support you in navigating. Due to the complex nature of creating those cohorts, we will not be able to accept any preferences for AM/PM, but we will provide our families with as much notification as possible to help support you in finding childcare during the times when your child will not be in school. Sherry, I'm going to go ahead and have you at this point just do a quick overview before we share the specific schedules for secondary.
Sure. So secondary looks a little bit different than elementary. In the secondary model, we would have an A-B model. In that model, students would come to school either as part of an A cohort or a B cohort. They would come to school 2 days a week. So the A cohort would come to school on Mondays and Tuesdays, and the B cohort would come to school on Thursdays and Fridays. Wednesdays would be a remote day for all students. The one exception to this would be our students at Valley Continuation High School, and I'll explain their schedule in a moment. Also, secondary age siblings, we would make every effort to place them in the same cohort, either the A or the B cohort, to the extent that that's feasible. But again, the complexities of the master schedule and the variety of courses that secondary students are enrolled in may not make that possible in all cases. We're also unable, for those same reasons, to accept A/B preference requests, and families will be given as much notice as possible on A/B assignments, but we do not have a firm date at this point.
Next slide, Kyoki. So I'm going to review the elementary hybrid schedules, and there are 3 different slides. If you see at the top, you can see the grade levels and the return dates for each of those grade level bands. One of the things that I want to preface before starting to share these schedules is these are schedules just for our hybrid students, or students who are returning to in-person instruction. All students that are going to remain in distance learning will continue with the distance learning schedule that has been in place since the beginning of this school year. So there will be no changes to our students who will be attending in remote for our staff and students. This schedule here is for those students who will be returning for hybrid in-person instruction. One of the things that you'll notice when you look at all of these schedules, and when we share them with you in the survey, you'll be able to see them all side by side to see that our arrival windows, which are in the orange blocks, and our dismissal windows are staggered by these grade level bands to allow us to have a smaller number of students arriving or leaving campus at any given time, to be able to maintain our safety protocols, and especially with physical distancing. You can see the in-person learning time on the left side. You see an AM schedule where students would, in DK, preschool and kindergarten, would be in school from 8:40 to 10:40. And then the PM group, you can see, would be in class from 12:30 to 2:30. Part of the biggest reason for the gap in between groups is to make sure that we have adequate time to clean all of the classrooms in between our cohort groups to maximize our safety protocols. On the far right-hand side, you can see that we have on Wednesday, all students will be remote. The Wednesday schedule for our in-person students would be a 30-minute interactive learning time with 30 minutes of remote intervention and student support. And due to the complex nature of teaching in a hybrid setting, Wednesdays will follow very similarly to our middle school schedule in providing planning and preparation and collaboration time for our staff in implementing a hybrid instructional model. Next slide, please. So this is here for grades 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. As you can see, this date is March 22nd, which would be the following Monday after the 18th. So we would have our DK preschool and kindergarten students would be in school for 2 days, and then 2 instructional days later, we will begin with our 1st through 3rd graders. Again, the staggered arrival window and dismissal windows are here, and you can see the in-person learning times, 8:25 to 10:35 for 1st through 3rd grade in the morning, and then 12:25 to 2:35 in the afternoon with that same Wednesday schedule on the right. Next slide. And then grades 4 and 5 would be 2 in-person school days later, because Wednesday is the remote day. So the 25th would be for 4th and 5th, which would be the Thursday after we open for DK. So all of our elementary grade students would arrive within 1 week of each other. Again, same model in regards to the arrival and dismissal windows with the in-person learning times for the AM and PM, with the Wednesday schedule on the right-hand side. Next slide, Kyoki. So barring any significant spike in COVID-19 cases, hybrid in-person instruction would begin on March 18th in a staggered model. You can see the dates that were on each of those slides here in more of a laid out form so that you can see the start dates for each of our grade level bands. For our preschool, DK, and kindergarten families, we will be notifying those families by the end of the day on Friday, March 12th, of their placement. And then that week of March 15th, we will be notifying our 1st through 5th grade families in the order of return based upon when their scheduled return to in-person instruction date is. Next slide. Dr. Moirao, I think you're going to address this slide, and then Sherry will share the secondary schedules.
Okay, so what we do have, while in the purple tier, actually secondary schools are not based on our public county health, are not to open until we're in the red. In the meantime, what we are doing is we're accelerating and getting more and more of our learning hubs, or we're getting learning hubs established. And right now, because we've got targets for the elementary, we want to get things started at the secondary level so that those students have the support that they need until we've got them back on campus. And what we're doing is that once we're in the red tier for about 5 days, and we will working towards making sure we've got the secondary schools open. And again, much like same thing as with the elementary, the schedules will be attached, explanations and videos will be available to you when as we send out the declaration forms, so that we're explaining as much as possible and you can make an informed decision. Sherry, were you going to talk about secondary schedules at this point?
Yes, Kiyoki has a set of slides that I prepared for sharing the secondary schedules. Kiyoki? Okay, so thank you, Kiyoki. For the secondary schedules, this is going to look more familiar to those of you with secondary students because we're following very closely the model that we've had in place all year long. So this is essentially the same bell schedule if you have a student in grades 6 through 8 that we've been following since the beginning of the school year. The differences are that on the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, what would happen after period 5 is that students, period 5 on Mondays and Thursdays and period 6 on Tuesdays and Fridays, students would be dismissed. That would be their final class. So students who are in person for instruction that day would go to 3 block periods. And then after the final period, they would either go to grab lunch and head home, or if they needed intervention, they would be attending the directed small group intervention on the campus. And then after intervention, they would grab lunch and go home. The afternoons would be all remote for all students. The distinction in hybrid learning is that not all flex periods would meet every day. Teacher teams would have would make the determination about which flex periods they would be using each week, and those would be posted in advance, but they would not all be held every afternoon as they are now. Wednesdays also would remain essentially unchanged. Students would start with an advisory period. Again, everyone remote, then 2 blocks of intervention, also remote, and some open teacher-student support time, followed by lunch and asynchronous learning in the afternoon. Next slide, please, Kiyoki. At Dublin High School, again, the schedule looks very much like it does now. Because Dublin High School has a block schedule with 7 periods rather than 6, the challenge was what to do on the Tuesday and Friday that we have period 7. So on those days, rather than having everyone stay, have lunch, and then go to period 7, students would follow the schedule that they've been following, but before period 7, they would grab lunch and go home. And then period 7 would be remote for all students. Again, there would be open teacher-student support time in the afternoon, but that would also all be remote. And next slide, please, Kiyoki. The Wednesday schedule for DHS would remain essentially unchanged. Again, with everyone remote on those days, starting with an advisory period and directed intervention, and then student teacher support time and asynchronous learning in the afternoons. I think we're ready for the next one as well, Kiyoki. Thank you. Valley High School is also on a block schedule, as you may recall, and that's working very well for them right now. They would continue on a block schedule in the hybrid model, again, Monday, Thursday, and Tuesday, Friday. as the two different cohorts, A and B. The distinction here is that because Valley High School has a relatively small enrollment, depending on the number of families who choose to return their students for in-person instruction, it may be possible for all students at Valley High School to attend every day of school. So we won't know that until we get the declaration surveys returned. But under this model, the students who are on campus would attend periods 1, 3, and 5, for instance, on Monday and Thursday, and then they would also have a grab and go lunch. They would head home, and then there would be open teacher-student support time in the afternoon. On Tuesdays and Fridays, the same thing essentially would occur. There would be a grab and go lunch after period 4. There are a few students who are enrolled in a PE class, period 6, and those students would, that class would remain just like period 7 at DHS as remote. So only period 6 would be remote at Valley High School under the hybrid model. And then again, teacher-student support time. Kyoki, I think the last slide we're ready for. Wednesdays at Valley High School are a little bit different. They do not have an asynchronous day. It's really important for our students in the continuation high school to spend have that time with their teachers, and the teachers want to see their students on Wednesdays. So periods 1 through 5 would be held. They're shorter, they're 36 minutes each. But again, if all students are able to come back, then all students would attend all 5 periods on Wednesday. If not, this would be an alternating Wednesday. So cohort A would attend one Wednesday and cohort B would attend the next. And again, grab and go lunch, and period 6 would be remote. And I think that is the final slide. Thank you, Kyoki.
Thank you, Kyoki. So that's our plan to return. Questions?
Oh, okay, thank you. I want to do a little logistical issue with the board right now. It is coming up on our hard stop time. We have 2 options. We can extend or we can continue the meeting. This is the first of 4 action items, 2 of which I think will go fairly quickly. Thoughts from the board? Probably my estimate, and this is just an estimate, will probably go till midnight or so if we continue.
I think that tonight we should continue. I think this topic in particular, a lot of people are very interested in and have been waiting for us to get to. So I would advocate for that. And when you're ready, I'm happy to make a motion, unless you're not ready.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that before we vote here? No. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and make the motion?
I move that we extend the meeting till 1 a.m.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Vicky, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Ms. Chang?
Aye.
Trustee Pelham?
Aye.
Trustee Quo?
Aye.
Trustee Blackman?
Aye.
Vice President Rouse?
Aye.
President Charrier?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
President
Okay,
Chair,
so now that-
excuse me, President Chair, I feel confident that the students may want to be here for this discussion, but at some point they may want to check out and study and stuff. And I just, if you would mind giving them that option when they feel the
Oh,
moment to
sure.
move.
You're welcome to go anytime. You probably want to hear this one. I don't think there's a big radical vote or anything that's going to take place. I don't know if we're going to get many comments or anything, but anyway, you use your own best discretion on that, and we will continue. At this time, I'm asking for clarifying questions only about any portion of the presentation. We're going to start with Trustee Pelham and then Trustee Chang.
I just had a question. Would this be also the schedule for SDC students who might be in a smaller cohort in class already, or would they have an alternative schedule that might allow them to be on campus more often?
This would be the same schedule. This would be the same schedule for all of our students, our SDC students, as well as our general education students.
Okay. And then also for elementary, would I'm assuming PE, music, those kind of specialists would be in the asynchronous time, or would that be when they're in person? Because
That is correct. So if a child, our music and PE programs would remain remote. So those would be online. And if you're an AM student, your music and PE time would be in the PM time slot and vice versa.
thank you.
So just to follow up on that, if a person has second period physical ed, then they just have a kind of a break in their schedule?
I'm sorry, Dan, that was only related to elementary school.
Elementary.
I'm sorry.
Correct.
I'm sorry. Okay. My bad. Trustee Chang and then Trustee Rouse.
Yeah, just a couple questions about the high school schedule. Regarding seventh period being online, how do we ensure that students are going to be able to get home on the east side, particularly in time for seventh period, in addition to having lunch? Because I know a lot of students take the bus home or will have to get picked up by parents, and that does take a while to get from the east side to the from the west side to the east side. Excuse me. And I'm kind of concerned that will students be able to eat lunch and be able to get back in time for seventh period at home? And then I guess I'll ask my second question after.
That's a great question. It did come up as we were discussing the schedule. Right now, we feel like it's worth giving this schedule a try. And then we would be open to tweaking it if it turns out that that's going to be a problem. So we don't want to extend the day any longer than we need to for students. And so we're going to give it a try, and we'll see if we need to tweak it, because we do want to be sure students have time both to commute across town and also to eat their lunch.
Yeah, thanks for the adaptability. I really appreciate that. But also, wouldn't it be like a logistical issue if like teachers have to create like a an online plan in addition to an in-person plan, like, and then have to execute it differently for periods? Like, would that be, I guess, a burden for students who end up having to take their seventh period class online but do the rest of it in person?
Well, that's also a good question. I think that we won't see that much dissimilarity, because remember that even for the students who are on campus, we won't be able to engage with each other the way we typically would. The students will be sitting at desks. They'll have to remain 6 feet apart. Everyone will be masked. So it won't be quite the same kind of experience that you're used to when you go to school. And so I don't think the period 7 will be delivered in a way that's significantly different than the other periods. I think you wouldn't see that much difference between the two.
Got it. And then one last question: how are we handling zero period? Because personally, I'm in zero period leadership, and I'm wondering whether zero period will be going as normal in person or not.
Zero period is on the schedule for in-person. I believe it's divided up so that it occurs every day instead of the block, right? So that would continue in the in-person hybrid model as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Rouse and then Trustee Blackman.
Thank you. Trustee Chang brings up a good point about our students and how they will get to and go home from campus and public transportation. Has staff already thought about how we are going to figure out which students are using public transportation?
It is something we've discussed, and I can't say, I need to double check. I don't want to misspeak, but I believe we will have a question in the declaration survey that would ask students if they're going to need public transportation or likely to use public transportation.
Fantastic. So you guys already thought of that. Awesome. I appreciate that. I have a question about secondary, and I think the slide said, we have to, secondary is contingent at per county policy on being in red. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and we certainly are making improvements towards that. And I don't remember who said it earlier, but we're probably, although we didn't hit red today, could certainly be red by next week. If we assume, just for the moment, that we do continue on that trajectory and we are in red soon, what would be the earliest date that we could open secondary?
That's a very difficult question to respond to, and that's why we left it open-ended right now, because of the nuances of secondary. And again, as I said a few moments ago, keeping the fidelity of the courses and keeping the right credentialed teachers and teaching the right courses. I don't have a definitive answer on that one at this moment, but that's a piece that we're working diligently to acquire.
And so then a follow-up question, are you able to share with us what is the information that we seek in order to make that date? And when would a time be that we could make that date? Because I do think having a date is important. And so I'm advocating for that. And so I guess I'm curious, what is the information that we still need? And maybe it's just complex and I don't understand it. That's possible. And when can we make a date?
Well, right now it's getting back to declarations from both our families as well as our staff, and then being very clear about who's can be present, who won't be present. It was interesting to hear a little bit of the statistics from Trustee Chang as to what the student population she surveyed. I know you're pushing me for a date, and at this moment in time for the high school, I would hope that by mid-March, when we're opening up our elementary schools, at that point, we'll be able to target and say, this is the exact date. Again, our site administrators would like to open, they're eager to do that. And it makes some sense if we could do something before the spring break, that would be our ideal, but it may actually end up falling after the spring break opens or is done.
So not to drill too far on this, but it sounds like are you suggesting that in the middle of March we'll be able to make a date, or we can't make a date? It might be the middle of March-ish.
Sherry, would I be accurate in saying that you're working directly with all those secondary folks? Is that to make a date, not to open on that date, but to make a date?
Oh,
I think as you stated, Dr. Moirao, we need two pieces of critical information: which staff members are going to be returning for in-person instruction and which students are going to be returning for in-person instruction. Once we have those two pieces of information, we'll know how complex it is. So that's, at this point, we don't know the level of complexity yet. So I believe by March 15th, we'll know the level of complexity and be able to target a more certain date.
Okay, and maybe it's possible that by our next board meeting, we'll have a sense of the level of complexity. And
I would think, yes, by the next board meeting, we will definitely know the complexity.
so then maybe by our next board meeting, we'll have a date for secondary.
We will try for that. It's really dependent on the complexity, but we will try for that.
Okay. I do think it's important and helpful for families to have a date, and that can be whatever date is realistic, and it can come after we get the input that we need. But I do really think that is going to be helpful, and I strongly hope that we are able to put that date together and have that date be before spring break. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Trustee Blackman, you were next.
Hi, thank you. I know this is really complicated, but I had actually several questions across the different sort of school site groups. Can you explain why the proposal for the elementary schools, why Wednesday goes remote? I can understand for the secondary schools because of the way that they move between classrooms and the breaks they have to take. I understand that it creates a 4-day schedule, and so therefore one day needs to get pulled out. But why would we propose that for the elementary schools? They don't move between classrooms the way the secondary school students do.
Sure. We looked at surrounding districts as well in regards to their in-person hybrid schedules and what they are doing in regards to a 4-day versus a 5-day week. So we are definitely in alignment with both San Ramon and Pleasant and our neighboring districts in regards to that. The real challenge is the complexity of teaching in a hybrid model. It's very different than teaching traditionally. And so providing our staff with the time to be able to plan, collaborate, and make sure that that instruction is quality instruction, we felt that we needed to provide time for our staff on those Wednesdays to be able to adequately address the needs of teaching in a hybrid environment.
And remember that our teachers will be teaching in this hybrid model, but they also still need to plan for some asynchronous time. So it's two different types of planning that our folks need to do, and they need time to do that.
And my follow-up question will be, though, until we get the numbers back from the community, we don't really know in effect if we're going to have that perfectly even split between folks that want to be distance learning and folks that want to be in hybrid. There could be the possibility where the majority want to stay distance learning or the majority want to be hybrid, in which case would we consider putting the Wednesdays back into the schedule for the students?
Well, that's something that we would need to sit and really have a serious conversation about, particularly with our associations as well. Once again, that's not a yes/no answer at this moment in time, but you floated the idea out there.
Okay, I just want to be certain, because for the families that are looking at this schedule, they need to be clear that returning to this hybrid reduces the amount of contact hours that you have with the teachers now in distance learning from 4 to 2 each day. And so that's a significant drop. And then we're losing one of our 5 days a week as well. So that's a significant loss in time actually with the teacher directly. So my second question is, in the schedule, you showed a period of time of 10 minutes for students to come onto campus. And I'm kind of curious, when we talk about these numbers of looking at the ideal situation would be, again, a half and half break, half want to go back to school, half want to not. Maybe that's easier for us, but that's still hundreds of students with their parents coming to our campus and only a 10-minute window. The county and the state, in fact, has given some parameters as to how large groups can gather together outside. And I'm wondering, we had floated the idea of staggering starts to try and mitigate maybe the number of people coming onto campus at the same time. I'm wondering if you've considered the idea of staggering the start and end time.
Yeah, if you look at all of this schedule side by side, you will see that there is a staggered start and end time in the grade level bands. So it's not 10 minutes across the board. It's a 10-minute window for each of the bands, but those bands are also staggered. So what it really ends up being is over a period of 20 minutes, we're bringing students onto our campus as opposed to over a period of 10 minutes.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. Okay, my next question.
Really quickly tell you though, if say half the kids come back in hybrid, only half are then coming in the morning. So you have a quarter of your normal traffic. And a lot of those are siblings. I can tell you, we have my site in San Ramon has the second most classes back, and it's not a problem. It's kind of amazing how little traffic there is still. So I think the minor staggering and the AM PM bands will allow that safe distancing.
Okay, that's good to hear. I like to just see how the numbers flesh out. My next question will be on, so when we get to the secondary schools, and in particular the high school, I was interested about some of these students will come back and some won't. And this is very different than the elementary school, where we actually have students in very specialized courses. Some cases, all of our freshmen have to take, English. So we know they're all going to at some point be in an English class, either remote or on site. But for some of our other more specialized courses, there may only be one section. And I didn't really hear, and maybe this is the challenge, but how do we guarantee that no matter what happens, that every student that is currently in a course that may only have one section, that they're still going to be able to take that section?
So I left out a very important piece of information, Trustee Blackman, in my sharing of the schedules. Unlike the model that Mr. Haar shared about the elementary students in distance learning staying in the current schedule, in the secondary schedule, again, we're going to continue operating under essentially the same schedule we have now. The students whose parents choose to keep them in distance learning will attend class via a Zoom session. So they would be attending the class with their current teacher, with the students who are physically there in person.
Okay, so my understanding is they're attending the 2 days a week on that alternate date with their teacher. I'm trying to understand, because I know the alternating schedule, but that alternating schedule is for the entire class. So are they using half the students in the class at the same time as the teacher's teaching it with half the students remote?
Potentially, again, what we have to do is figure out those numbers. So that's why we've said we really, at the secondary level, we really need to avoid moving students as much as possible, because students are already enrolled, particularly at the high school level, in credit earning courses. And it's really important for them to not be shifted to new courses. So obviously we need to keep the students as much as possible with their current teachers in their current schedule. It may be necessary in some sections of some courses to make some schedule adjustments even under this schedule, because if 100% of the class decides to return of any particular section of period 1 English class, 100% decide to return, and the classroom doesn't accommodate at least 50% of those students with the physical distancing, some students' schedules will need to be changed. So that's where that's the puzzle that we're anticipating we get to solve.
Yeah, I understand it's really complicated. So my next question is going to be, and maybe this is sort of a lead in. So if a class, and I don't know how the numbers are working out at the secondary level, but let's just say for number's sake that there is 30 students in a classroom, and that teacher is teaching those students, and it's alternating days. We understand from the county that a teacher can only be in the room with one cohort, one group. So there's just 14 students. So in the case where we have 30 students that want to take that course, we can't have that teacher having contact with them at all. There's only 15 and that's it.
Actually, that's not true at the secondary level. At the secondary level, the students will move around, and so they'll be switching cohorts through the day. And the size of a class is not limited to a particular number. It's just the distancing that's required. So it will depend on the physical size of the classroom and how many seats can be arranged in that classroom and still maintain the physical distancing.
Okay, I'm trying to understand, because we talk about these pods, these limitations of like 15 people. So when you go, you attend, there's only 15 people. Now you're talking about a student that moves from a class to a class. There's this 15 people, that 15 people. So the 15-person pod is gone. Now we're talking about 100 people. The teachers are meeting with 100 to 200 people. I mean, at some point, how does this actually work with the parameters that I thought we had received with keeping it to just 15?
So it's true that under in the small stable cohort model that's been allowed to operate since last summer, the ratio had to be no more than 16 people in a small group. And it could be 2 adults and 14 students. It could be 3 adults and 13 students, but it couldn't be more than 16. But under the reopening guidelines, those parameters go away. So we don't have to restrict the size of a particular group of students taking in any given course or in any given section. We do have to maintain the physical distancing in the assigned classroom space. So it's the challenge is being sure that we can accommodate the students in a classroom that may only fit 14 desks, for instance, when they're spaced 6 feet apart, but we have, you know, half the class is, or more than half the class wants to come back. And that's why the AB model is so important, because even though we know some students will remain in distance learning, we're still going to have to divide the remaining students probably in half in order to fit them in those classroom spaces under the current guidelines.
Okay, so I understand some of that. I would ask, because we're asking this question now, and I do believe at this hour, there's probably a lot of family members who are not watching this. We need to explain this really clearly before we send out this survey, because I'm having challenges trying to understand what these numbers mean. I'm hearing now that my student isn't going to be necessarily exposed to 15 people, but potentially hundreds. That really changes how I'm going to answer that survey. And I do feel that how it's explained needs to be really carefully explained, even going through like, as if I'm walking you through the first time getting on an airplane. You know, they tell you how to buckle your seatbelt and how you pull down the cord and put your mouth. You need that level of explanation, because I do not feel that knowing that this is as complex as it is, that just looking at a survey is really going to get you a really good answer and response. And I'm concerned with family members that do send their students back on their first day, when they come back and they find out, wait a second, this wasn't what I expected. That may throw the whole model out the window when we start having all of these students peel out. Maybe for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe more students will want to come in, but I do want to make certain that the expectations are very clear. And so we get a really good response back from families. So thank you.
As do we, and I think Director Haar can speak a little bit more to that, how we're going to communicate that to families.
Sure, we're in the process right now of developing not just the survey itself, but also videos, so that our families can also see what it will be like, a kind of a day in the life of a student. Videos that have to do with just the educating of our families in regards to what hybrid instruction will look like.
That's really helpful. Thank you. One last question. I've been looking at some of the site plans that have come out. I forwarded one comment to Dr. Moirao. We have students that have medical needs that come to our campuses, and I did not see information that discusses our policies, especially at the elementary school level. We do not allow those students to carry their medication onto campus. Typically, a parent will have to escort the student to campus, hand them over to a teacher, walk away with the medication. If we are bringing students to campus without that parental escort, who is escorting these students who have EpiPens and other medication that they need with them at all times? They need to be under the supervision of an adult who can identify when that student needs that medication immediately. Having them wander around a campus all by themselves, asking their friends to look out for them, is really not safe. So I'd like to see you guys address how at the elementary school level we are allowing these students to carefully, maybe they have to be escorted onto campus like some of our SPED students, I do not know, but we need something in our plans that address this gap that we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, we are in clarifying question only mode right now. Trustee Rouse.
Thank you. I have a question. This may have been in the slides, but I'm just trying to understand the turnaround of asking our families and asking folks and then turning that around. So you said a survey is going to go out later this week. Is that right?
Thursday is our target date, and
Thursday.
we're calling it a declaration because we think survey may have gotten killed, overdone.
I apologize. I've heard that
No,
rationale. I absolutely support it, and I appreciate you reminding me. Declaration. So our declaration request will go out on Thursday. And about how much time do you envision our families will have to respond?
We're asking for them to come back on Sunday. And then on Monday, we will start following up with those that we don't have.
Got it. And I think, okay, now that you say that, I think you did say this in the slide. So Thursday to Sunday. Okay. And that's for families. And are we also asking staff for declarations? Is that part of this process as well?
We are calling it declarations. You were just saying so many terms, but we are asking staff their preference as well. Okay.
And when are we doing that?
Simultaneous, actually.
Simultaneous.
Actually, staff may not get out till Friday, but we're hoping to try to do the same time.
But give or take a few days, that's basically the same. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And that's for both elementary and secondary families and staff.
Yes.
Okay. So by Monday of next week, we will have the data to start.
We'll have a good chunk of data on Monday. That's when we start following up with those that we don't have.
Right. Yes, we won't have all the data. We'll have much of the data. Okay. And then to clarify, you said that if in general, this declaration from the family perspective is a choice that will be made throughout the year. And certainly if a family selects distance learning / remote, then they cannot choose later to move into hybrid. But if a family moves it, declares hybrid, and then for whatever reason is wanting to move back to remote, that is an allowable transition.
That way we can go because we can accommodate that. Going the other way, we start violating a lot of the cohort pieces.
Okay.
And I really want to affirm that all of this is a great deal of time is being put in by staff, but it's also getting accomplished because of our collaboration with our associations and what have you. This is a big pull on a lot of people in a very short amount of time. And so it's taking a lot of brains at the table.
Yes, and certainly there's a lot of progress that has been made since the last time we talked about that. So I think what I have to say next is not a question, so I will wait.
Okay, and trustee Pelham had her hand up.
I just had one quick clarification. My understanding is once we hit red, the cohorting rules loosen up quite a bit. That's why the secondary can go multiple, but the distancing and the masking continues.
That's correct. So in regards to reopening, the language changes from a specific number to the degree practicable. So it does provide more flexibility in regards to the cohort groups. But you're absolutely right. And that is one of the big differences between counties is some counties do allow secondary schools to open in the purple. Our county does not. So, you know, in Alameda County, it is very clear in the guidance that secondary schools cannot reopen until they are in the red tier.
Thank you.
And that's a critical piece. I think I mentioned it in the presentation. Curtis just repeated it, but we need to say one county is different than the next county. And, you know, people keep showing San Ramon as the example, but they're under some different guidance than we are in Alameda County.
Secondary. Their secondary is not open yet either, though.
Yes.
Just elementary.
So.
Okay, I guess I have a few questions. Thank you very much for the great presentation. First questions are about the declaration. The declaration dates are the same for secondary and elementary. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Will a person be allowed to declare for each student they have? Because you may want your K to go in person, but your 5th grader and your 11th grader to remain online. There'll be a way in the form.
Yeah, we're asking our families to complete one form per student.
Excellent. And I assume the form will be a little different for elementary than it will be for secondary, in that I hope we're telling people that the time with the instructor is, like for elementary, is being reduced from 20 hours a week to 8 hours a week. That there's that reduction in time you spend with your teacher. That's on the form, I hope.
The schedule is on. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Moirao.
Go ahead. No, you finish, Curtis.
The schedules will be attached to the form in regards to a comparison of instructional minutes. That is not currently on our surveys or on our declaration.
Okay. Well, I think we need to make that clear to people, because they'll be surprised that they got to spend 20 hours with their teacher. Now they only get to spend 8 hours with their teacher if they choose to go back to hybrid. So, okay, that's one thing. And I also was immediately concerned, and I know a few other trustees mentioned this, about the time between the last morning period and the start of period 7 seems to be pretty limited. I mean, you need all of that. Even if you had your own car, you need to get back across town, especially if you live way out on the east side. There's no time for lunch or whatever. And for the people that don't have their own car, which, you know, a lot of high school students don't, and they have to rely on transit, I hope, has someone called LAPTA to find out if they're even going to be running this supplemental route schedules?
Actually, they've contacted us at this point. I think it was Trustee Rouse had contacted you, and you connected me to them. I think it was you. And they want to see our schedules and things like that, because they want to work with us on putting that together.
Okay. And obviously, I guess we're helped by the fact that, you know, if half of the students want to attend back in person, but with the AB schedules, it's still not like it is with elementary, where only half are going in the morning, half go in the afternoon. They all attend period 1 on the same day.
Yes.
No, they're either in group A or B. So it's either 25. it would be 25% of the loading on the buses that was in the past,
Yeah.
so that may work out. So that would be good. Okay. And the last thing was the presentation that Ms. Sweeney showed for the secondary schedule was not posted. Are we making plans to post that to the website?
We will, yes.
Okay, because I'm sure a lot of people are interested in seeing that. Okay, let us go. I don't see any other hands raised for clarifying questions, so we're going to go Trustee Blackman.
I actually want to follow up to a question you had asked, President Charrier. On the 7th period, was there any thought to possibly pushing the schedule up in the day? In other words, starting first period earlier so that we could get 7th period to fit in the block earlier in the day. I am concerned about the ability for students to get back in time, that those students that do have long commutes home. So I'm just wondering if any thought was given to rearranging those periods.
We didn't talk about that explicitly, I suspect because 0 period has a pretty early start time already. So pushing that back any earlier, I see Trustee Chang does not like the idea of starting 0 period any earlier. But we will certainly, we've heard the comments tonight. I've been taking a couple of notes and I think we could certainly take it back and talk about it. So we appreciate that that's been raised tonight as a concern.
Yeah, the only reason why I bring it up is that we have all the students in 7th period, but only so many students in 0 period. So I think the impact of it needs to be looked at as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Rouse, you.
I'm okay. Never mind, President Chair. I'm okay.
Sorry.
I was going to,
your hand up.
I was sort of just touching my face, but I was going to make a comment on the early moving things earlier. I have a concern about that, but I think that's already been expressed. But I am concerned about the 7th period being remote, and I appreciate that maybe there is no other option, and that may just very well be the case. But you know, but I'm a little, that is on my mind. So I'm sure you guys will continue to discuss that. But I don't want to derail the progress either. So
I do want to bring up that Principal Byrne did let us know that there are actually fewer students enrolled in period 7 than some other periods of the day. So a lot of students have their Gale period 7. So
right.
the enrollment in classes with direct instruction is actually smaller during period 7 than other periods.
Okay. And is there any possibility that since there are so few, that those students could stay on campus for a period 7? You know, for example, if they have, you know, I mean, I don't know, do we teach science in 7th period? And if we do, you know, if a biology student or biology class is being taught 7th period, at least could we take a look and see if, without changing all the parameters of the schedule, but if we don't have that many students taking 7th period classes of instruction, then perhaps there's a way to do that not remote for the students to choose hybrid. Just something to take a look at.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that back and have a longer conversation about the issues that have been raised about 7th period tonight.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And Trustee Chang, we're still in clarifying questions mode right now. Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Chang.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether maybe allowing 7th period people to stay might actually, would it decrease the load of students coming home on the bus at once? Because if half the students say I have Gale period 7th period, then maybe we could separate the amount of people going home at once, which would decrease traffic and maybe decrease bus loads. Would that be something viable?
It might be. Yeah, I think again we keep coming back to the same answer, I know, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but until we get the declaration forms back from families and we know what teachers' preferences are, it's going to be really hard for us to be specific about what we can and can't do. So we'll know more soon, I hope.
Okay, with that answer, we are going to go to the public. We have the first speaker, please.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to, this is Robbie again, and as I spoke earlier this evening and echoed the work that we've been doing to get us to this point, I wanted to reinforce the message that came from Sherry and Curtis. My team is committed and has opened our schedule for the entire, like all night tonight, we've been talking and planning and figuring how to get this done. But as soon as that data comes in, we're pulling up our sleeves and we are going to get to work to figure out how this can work. The 7th period thing, Sherry and part of our team has already agreed that we would roll it out, see what works, and know that we're going to have to go back to the table to see if we need, not to the table literally, but to the planning station to see where we are going to need to work out kinks in this process. But we can't do anything until we get those numbers. So to the parent community, please, please, please fill those out, get them in, because we will be calling you on Monday morning and we will be reminding you to get your declaration form in. We are committed to making this work and again, committed to getting our kids back to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the last speaker?
Yes, there's no other public comment.
Oh, I think somebody
Great,
just popped
that's-
up.
Actually, one just came in. Sorry about that.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear that one.
Hi, so I just had a question regarding the kindergarten schedule and the total minutes that they would have in-person learning versus asynchronous. It doesn't indicate there how much time is asynchronous. And then I also noticed that the in-person learning is only 2 hours for kindergarten, and I've seen schedules from other districts where they have 2.5 hours in person. So I'm just curious on why there's a discrepancy in the number of minutes for instruction.
Is that the end of your comment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Curtis, did you want to talk about that public comment or not at this time?
Sure. I mean, I can address the question in regards to the amount of time. One of the pieces that we have to take into account is the size of our schools and the amount of classrooms that we have and the time that it will take to be able to clean the classrooms between cohorts. So that was a big piece of figuring out the instructional minutes, is that cleaning and safety piece in between groups, as well as staggering the schedules for all of our groups to ensure our sizes of the amounts of students that we have on our campus during the arrival and dismissal. All of those things play a role in determining the amount of time that you can have with students when you factor in all of those pieces.
Great, thank you. I believe that was the last public comment.
That is correct.
Okay, well, okay, public comment is closed. I'm really surprised we didn't get a lot more. With that being said, we're going to bring it back to the board for comments. Anybody want to say anything? Trustee Rouse, and then Trustee Coe.
Thank you. First, I want to show deep appreciation to our staff and to our associations for the tremendous progress that has been made, in particular over the last couple of weeks, to bring us to a point where we are looking at schedules and sending declaration questions and putting dates together. Really appreciate this. I believe our community really appreciates this. Our students and our staff really appreciate this. And I, as a board member, appreciate all of your hard work. This is really, really great. And I'm happy that we are here in this place and ready to move forward. I am, you know, I'll admit I was really hopeful that we could open on March 8th, but at the same time, I appreciate your honesty in telling us what is realistic, that March 18th is our realistic date. And so I am happy that we have a date for that and that we are moving forward. And I'm impressed with the planning and in terms of getting us to that point. I do want to circle back on getting a date for secondary. Probably, you know, maybe tired of me saying this one more time, but I do think it's really important that we push for a date and that waiting until the middle of March, I think, is too long to set our date. And so I'm hopeful that once that data comes in, that we can at least glean from that what might be realistic and put a date out to our community, our students and our staff and our families about that. I think the uncertainty of that piece is a very heavy weight on folks. And so I think finding clarity on that is extremely important. I know you guys are working, burning the candle at both ends and the midnight oil and everything. And I very much appreciate that. And so probably the last thing you need is one more, oh, we have to make sure we do this thing on your plate. But I just really do think it's important. And so I hope we can give that full consideration to bring a date, much sooner than the middle of March. The date doesn't have to be sooner, but to know what that date is sooner, so that we can be organized around that. But again, I just appreciate all the work and the planning and look forward to the continued work, and want to appreciate again all the people who have been working together collaboratively, really in the spirit of collaboration to map out a way forward. Deep appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Trustee Coe.
Thank you. I mirror all of Trustee Rouse's comments. I really appreciate the hard work that's being done right now by all. I wanted to just say that I've seen in my own students who are very, very independent workers, just sort of a really subtle slide in their overall affect, behavior, and enthusiasm. So I really, really am grateful that we are providing this route for the students that need it. I feel that there was one public comment about how she felt that her students are highly supported, and she has seen a change in her students as well. So it is just very tough to hear about students that just, for whatever reason, do not have that same level of support. I just can't imagine what they're going through. So I urge everyone to work together to bring us, to that opening date as quickly and smoothly as possible. I know it's a huge lift. To all the parents, and students, I just want to let you know too that it really won't be back to school as normal. So I want to just caution you to curb your expectations for going back to hybrid. I feel that it is a really wonderful chance for our children to see other faces in person. But there are a lot of caveats to being back in person. They won't be able to touch and hug each other. They won't be playing in the playgrounds. They won't be able to sit and eat lunch together and have recess together. But I do feel like the benefit of them just being able, even if they're in their little 6-foot circles, the benefit of being able to look over and see another student and smile or tease each other in person is so tremendous. So again, I just ask you to temper your expectations, but that we are working towards getting your kids back in class. And I thank everyone for just being positive and working together to do this. Thank you.
Trustee Pelham, then Trustee Blackman.
Alrighty, thanks. Yeah, I want to echo what everyone's saying. Thank you to DTA, CSEA, and everyone who's working to make this happen. I can say, as someone who has kids back on campus, it warms your heart as a teacher, and that's what, as teachers, we're people. We're not people that signed up to be on computers all day long, and so I think it is different. But there's a lot of smiling eyes. You can't see their faces, you can't see their mouths, but the kids are actually really good at wearing their masks. So I just want to kind of just reassure people that little kids are pretty good. We have preschool at my site, and they wear their masks. They're adorable in their little masks. And so I think it's exciting. And I think we also do need to honor those families who are not ready, and that's okay to pick that option, and that is an option. And that will still continue to be the same schedule, the same program. And that is a wonderful option. And that is what some people, they're doing great. They're loving it. And or that's just what their comfort level is. And that's okay. And then we honor those families that they do that. I know there's a lot of anxiety about changing teachers. At the elementary level, we've had kids just in the last week change, and they've kind of rolled with it. I feel like kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. I feel like the adults know what to worry about, and the kids are like, oh, hey, you're my teacher now. Okay. And they kind of roll with it for the most part. So I want to give them the credit that it'll be okay if they do change. We've got amazing teachers across the board at the elementary. And so I feel like, you know, we can make it work if we have to juggle some things. I do reiterate, I think if we can get a secondary date lined up, that would just kind of help people kind of mentally figure out. And if middle and high are opening on the same day, I don't know that they would need to be staggered or how that would work. I forgot to ask that. And the only other one kind of question, concern, maybe to think about, and maybe it's been discussed and thrown out, is I do have a slight concern about SDC being on the same schedule, and would there be some possibility of getting those kids a little bit more in-person time because they are already in a small cohort to begin with? Would there be some way to modify those schedules just a bit to give them a little bit more time on campus? So that's kind of it. I'm excited. I honestly feel a huge change from a few weeks ago. I think the vaccination things and there's just been a turn in of things, and it's nice. I'd love to get some kids back on campus before the end of the school year. So that's it for now.
Thank you. Trustee Blackman.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad that we're going to move forward and provide families with options. I think that's important because I think our community really feels that they have been denied the ability to choose for themselves and for their children. I think that is important. But I will make this, I hate to say this, but COVID doesn't care if we have a plan. It doesn't care if you want to go back. It doesn't care whether you wear your mask well or if you follow all the rules. It doesn't follow our rules. This is a virus, and it's highly contagious. And for all the planning we're going to put together, families need to recognize that the decisions they make for their children are theirs that they make alone. We're offering them this opportunity, but it is a very serious decision to make for your family. And I want to dispense the idea that some families feel that they're not comfortable going back. Many families have medical reasons that they cannot go back, and their children recognize this. So I want to dismiss the notion that this is just a freewheeling choice of not wanting to go back. There may be families that don't want to. There are many more families in this community that can't have their children go back. And we need to understand, recognize the seriousness of what that means to our community. So I will say, though, that I really like the work and the effort that went into this plan. I do feel that it offers an opportunity to get our elementary school students and our secondary school students the opportunity to go back onto campus, to be with their classmates, and to have some amount of learning. My only caution would be that we have seen a very large reduction in the amount of hours that those students are actually learning with their teacher, be it virtually or together in the same classroom. My last point is that I feel that of anything, especially at the secondary level, we have to work very hard. I know this is a tall order, Sherry, Matt, and Curtis, to ensure that students that are currently in those courses, that they retain those courses and those teachers. This is the end of year, and this is probably one of the most important points when students are moving into their finals, that they not have that hiccup. It is so detrimental for them to continue with their same teachers that we cannot take them away. So I would ask that we do everything possible to work around that. I think the schedule looks great, but I think maybe there are going to have to be changes around that schedule to ensure that we provide that continuity for those students. So I am happy that we're bringing this back so that the students will return to school starting in March and that families will have options. But I do feel that we need to convey the seriousness of this decision for them. We are not going back to school the way it was. Things are going to be different. And as I think Trustee Coe had mentioned, the expectations need to be thus. This is not going to be running back to school and seeing our teachers and hugging our friends. This is going to be going back to school a la COVID. And it's going to be different and it's going to feel different. So we need to be very realistic about that. But for our families, I'm happy that you have choice and that the district staff has worked so hard to do this for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'll weigh in. Yeah, I really want to compliment staff. coming out with a plan. I wasn't sure when I first heard this was going to be on the agenda. We'd have specific dates and a specific plan. It would be, you know, that it's coming, but we're still working on it. And I don't know how I can convey how really pleased I was that we have a good, well thought out plan, and we have an implementation process to make it happen. And I do share some of Trustee Rouse's concern about anything we can do to set that date as soon as possible for the secondary would be great. And we can move on. We just got a public comment. I'm going to actually say that that time has closed. We've been on this item for quite a while, unless the board feels radically different on that. So, okay. Anything else on this item?
Well,
No, okay.
Thank you. If I may, President Cherrier, thank you to the board for the many compliments you've handed. It has been a collaborative process. Many people have been working on it. People that you see on the screen. I can honestly tell you, I don't think, it wouldn't be accurate to say that we're on it 24/7, because I do think they got some sleep time. But I will tell you, 7 days a week, I am in communication with one or more of the people on our staff focused around topics like this. And there's been a lot of people, and again, working with our associations and to make this happen and move it forward. Thank you for acknowledging that, and my sincere appreciation to the staff who's put in so much time and effort on all of this. Yes, it's a celebration. Thank you.